Now, one of the first things that we have to consider if we're going to photograph garden birds is how we attract those birds and how we feed them. Now, there are several different types of feeder. This is one of them. And it's got a lot of advantages over some of the more traditional feeders. For a start, this particular perch, if a heavy bird goes on it, it closes off the feeding hole, so access to food is restricted. So it's basically for the lighter bird. The problem with it is that it's made out of mild steel plate and it goes rusty and the mechanism starts to seize up. You have to keep them clean if you want to use them over a long period. Now, this is another location in my garden where I put out feeders for various types of bird, and this includes one of my favourite types of feeders, and I'll tell you why. This feeder here is all plastic. It has 4 feeding rings for the birds, and it is very easy to disassemble and hence keep clean. In addition, this particular feeder, which is totally squirrel proof, is a really good quality feeder and works very well indeed. And of course, I also have one of the feeders that I showed you earlier. Now, one of the things we also have to consider is obviously the food that we feed to the birds and how we store it. I store food in these 3 bins. One is for seed, one is for peanuts, and the other is for fat balls and various other things that I think may attract certain types of bird. One thing that I have found is that if you buy mixed seed, because of the amount of husk which is normally encountered when you buy that type of seed, the birds throw most of it away. You're far better off buying quality food. And I buy my food from Kennedy's Bird Feed Supplies. I find the quality is excellent and I've never had any problem with it. Now, another thing that we have to think about is what sort of hide we might want to use whilst photographing or videoing garden birds. I prefer this hide, which is called a chair hide. And the reason I prefer it is because it's got a really nice, comfortable chair, so you can sit there for long periods of time while you're photographing or videoing birds. The hide itself comes over the top of you, and it gives you perfect cover for birds in the garden. One thing that I do is I put 2 levels of scrimming on. I find that if I do that, the birds have no sense of any movement inside the hide when you're perhaps manually focusing or zooming the lens. Anyway, we'll go on to the camera equipment that I use very shortly, but this hide I can highly recommend. Not one for actually carrying around with you because it's quite heavy. There are better hides than this for doing that, but for the garden where you're just literally moving from, say, the garage to your bird feeding station, this is superb and I highly recommend it. So let's take a closer look at the rig that I use and the setup for videoing garden birds. Starting first of all with the camera, which is the Panasonic GH6, and it's inside a small rig cage, allowing me to attach the various accessories. The lens which I typically use is the 45 to 175 Panasonic powered lens. Now this allows me, in conjunction with the Liebeck ZC-3DV, to control both the zoom on the lens as well as stopping and starting recording. Now, most people will tell you that the Panasonic GH6 is not brilliant for automatic focus. However, depending on the distance you are from the bird and how much it fills the frame, you can quite easily use automatic focus. A much safer way, of course, is to use manual focus. And when I do this, rather than manually focusing by moving the lens ring, I use a small rig magic focus system where This piece of equipment attaches to the camera and is controlling the movement of the focus ring on the lens as a result of turning the controller over here. So now I can get perfect focus on this subject simply by using that ring. In addition, I have the Panasonic audio controller and a Rode VideoMic. And finally, I use a power bank, because if you're sitting in a hide for 2 to 3 hours, then using a power bank stops you having to make a lot of movements in terms of changing batteries. Now, whilst you don't need a separate monitor, I find that this FeelWorld monitor is absolutely excellent, and because it's a touchscreen and allows you to zoom in by pinching, when you're then using the controller for focus, you can see it makes life so much easier to get a very precise focus on the subject. And so, whilst not essential, I do feel that it's a luxury that's well worthwhile. Now, the tripod I use is one that I don't think you can get anymore. I had a mental aberration when I bought this many years ago because it was quite expensive. It's the Liebeck tripod with a fluid head. The fluid head is counterbalanced and it's just perfect. Now, this rig clearly isn't the cheapest rig in the world by any means, but I have to say that the results that you can get from it are absolutely spectacular, especially when videoing birds. So that's the total of the system setup that I use.